The M107 Barrett weighed 32 pounds, and Rear Admiral Harrison Keller held it like it was contaminated. He turned the rifle over in his weathered hands, examined it with theatrical disgust, then set it down on the wooden table between them with a thud that echoed across the silent briefing room at Fort Bragg. 23 elite operators watched from folding chairs arranged in precise rows. Delta operators, SEAL team veterans, Marine raiders, the best shooters the United States military had produced in a generation, all assembled for the same purpose. 6 positions. 1 counterterrorism task force. No room for weakness. Staff Sergeant Alina Ray stood at attention near the back wall, the only woman in the room, her dress blues immaculate, her face revealing nothing. Keller's gray eyes found her like heat-seeking missiles. "You're Miguel Ray's granddaughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Admiral. The Miguel Ray who trained under Carlos Hathcock in Vietnam. 93 confirmed kills. Legend of the Marine Scout Sniper community." "Yes, Admiral." Keller nodded slowly, his jaw tight. The room held its breath. "Good genetics don't make good operators," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your grandfather earned his reputation putting rounds downrange in the Khe-Sun Mountains. You earned yours." He paused, flipping through a manila folder. "Where exactly, Staff Sergeant? Some FOB in Helmand? Shooting insurgents from behind concrete walls." Alina's spine stayed rigid. 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments, Admiral. Sanjin, Marja, Kandahar Province. 47. Keller let the number hang in the air like smoke. "That's cute. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me take you back to where Alina Ray's impossible journey began." Someone in the back row coughed. Keller set down the folder and clasped his hands behind his back, beginning a slow circuit around the room. He moved like a shark, all controlled power and predatory patience. 3 decades in naval special warfare had carved his body into a weapon, even at 54. His chest still filled the khaki uniform. His arms still strained the fabric. "Let me be crystal clear about something," he announced. "The Joint Special Operations Command has ordered me to conduct the selection process with equal opportunity protocols. I am required to evaluate every candidate based on identical standards." He stopped directly in front of Alina. "I am not required to lower those standards." His face hovered 18 inches from hers. She could smell the coffee on his breath, see the broken capillaries mapping his nose from decades of cold water insertions and high-altitude jumps. "Women do not belong in special operations," he said quietly, "just for her. They are a liability, a distraction, a political experiment that will get good men killed." He smiled without warmth. "But don't worry, Staff Sergeant. You'll wash out on your own. They always do." He stepped back and addressed the room. "Selection begins at 0430 tomorrow. For days, 12 elimination events, physical assessments, weapons qualifications, tactical problem solving under stress. The 6 candidates who perform best will be assigned to the task force. The rest of you will return to your units and pretend this never happened." Keller gathered his folders and moved toward the exit. At the door, he paused. "One more thing." He didn't turn around. "I've personally designed every test, every scenario, every variable." Now he glanced over his shoulder directly at Alina. "Good luck." The door slammed shut behind him. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Alina remained at attention, her eyes fixed on the far wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. A hand touched her shoulder. "Don't let him get in your head." She turned to find a massive Delta operator extending his palm, Master Sergeant Marcus Webb, according to the name tape on his chest. African-American, mid-30s, built like an NFL linebacker with kind eyes that seemed wrong on a face designed for violence. "Webb," he said simply. "First SFODD. Ray, Scout Sniper. I know who you are." Webb's grip was firm, but not competitive. "Your work in Marja made the rounds. That Overwatch position during Operation Moshtarak. 18 confirmed in 72 hours. Alina allowed herself a small nod. "You were there." "Adjacent valley. We heard about you." Webb released her hand and glanced toward the door where Keller had disappeared. "He's testing you. Right now. before the selection even starts. I notice he does this, finds a person he thinks doesn't belong, and makes them his project. Last year was a ranger who'd been medically recycled. Year before that, a SEAL with a DUI in his jacket. Webb's voice dropped. He broke them both by day 2. What happened to them? Rangers pushing papers in some S4 shop in Kansas. SEAL got chaptered out 6 months later. Couldn't recover. Webb studied her face. Keller has a gift. He finds a fracture line and hammers it until you shatter. Alina met his eyes. Then he'd better bring a bigger hammer. Webb smiled for the first time. That's the spirit. The barracks were Spartan. 16 bunks arranged in rows, with blankets folded with geometric precision, footlockers positioned at exact intervals. The building had been constructed during World War II and smelled like history and floor wax. Alina chose a bunk near the back corner, away from the windows, with clear sight lines to both exits. Old habits. She was unpacking her gear when the door opened and 3 more candidates entered. 2 SEALs and a Marine Raider, based on their uniforms. They noticed her immediately. The tallest one, a blonde SEAL with a face like carved granite, stopped mid-stride. You got to be kidding me. His name tape read Thornton, Petty Officer First Class. The Budweiser trident on his chest gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Problem? Alina asked without looking up from her footlocker. Thornton exchanged glances with his companions. Just wondering if they're putting us in co-ed barracks now. What's next, gender-neutral latrines? Separate facilities are available if you're uncomfortable. The Marine Raider, a compact Hispanic man with sergeant chevrons. Suppress a laugh. Thornton's face reddened. Listen, sweetheart, Staff Sergeant. Alina straightened and faced him. You're addressing a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I've been awarded the Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars with valid devices, and a Purple Heart. My name is Ray, not sweetheart. Are we clear, Petty Officer? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Thornton's jaw worked silently. Behind him, the Raider had stopped trying to hide his smile. Crystal, Thornton finally muttered. He chose a bunk on the opposite side of the room. The Raider approached Alina's corner and set his bag on the adjacent bunk. Staff Sergeant Diego Ruiz, 1st Marine Raider Battalion. Ray, Scout Sniper. I figured. Ruiz began unpacking with efficient movements. Thornton's an ass, but he's good. For deployments, 2 Navy crosses. Try not to kill him before the selection ends. No promises. Ruiz laughed quietly. This is going to be interesting. By 2200, all 23 candidates had claimed bunks. Alina noted the divisions immediately. SEALs clustered together. Delta operators forming their own group. Marine Raiders and Green Berets scattered between. She was an island of one. She lay in her bunk after lights out, staring at the ceiling, sleep impossible. The darkness brought memories she'd spent 4 years trying to bury. Carlos had been 23 when the IED detonated. Lance Corporal Carlos Ray, her baby brother, following the family tradition that had started with their grandfather in Vietnam. He wanted to be a sniper too, had begged her to teach him. She'd told him to focus on his infantry skills first, to build the foundation. He never got the chance. The convoy had been traveling through Sanjin District on a routine resupply run. A pressure plate IED buried beneath 6 inches of packed dirt, triggered by the 3rd vehicle in the column. Carlos was in the 3rd vehicle. They recovered enough to fill half a body bag. Alina had been 4 miles away, providing overwatch from a ridgeline, her scope tracking the convoy's progress. She'd watched the explosion through her glass, watched the fireball rise, watched the smoke curl into that impossibly blue Afghan sky. She kept watching to the scope as her brother burned, because if she lowered the rifle, she would have screamed, and screaming would give away her position, and giving away her position would have endangered her spotter, and her spotter had a wife and 2 kids in San Diego who needed him to come home. So she kept watching. The military called it compartmentalization, the ability to separate emotion from mission. They trained you to do it, praised you when you succeeded, promoted you when you became a machine. What they didn't tell you was that the compartments eventually fill up, and when they overflow, everything spills out at once. Alina had spilled exactly once, in a hotel room in Kuwait, 3 days after Carlos's memorial service. She drunk an entire bottle of Jack Daniels, destroyed every piece of furniture within reach, and then sat in the bathtub until dawn with her M9 in her mouth, her finger on the trigger, her mind running calculations about trajectory and barrel length and whether it would hurt. She didn't pull the trigger, not because she wanted to live, but because she knew her grandfather would know. Somehow, Miguel Ray would know that his granddaughter had chosen the coward's exit, and she couldn't bear that disappointment, even from 3,000 miles away. So she put down the pistol, called her commanding officer, requested immediate return to duty. For years later, she was still here, still breathing, still carrying the weight of Carlos's ghosts and 47 souls she'd personally sent to meet their makers. The military gave her medals. The VA gave her a therapist. Neither gave her peace. She rolled onto her side and checked her watch. 0347, 43 minutes until they needed to be formed up and ready. Sleep wasn't coming. Fine. She rose silently, grabbed her PT gear, and slipped out of the barracks into the cool North Carolina darkness. Fort Bragg sprawled across 251 square miles of pine forest and sandy soil. The installation had been home to Special Operations Forces since 1961, when President Kennedy ordered the Army to establish a counterinsurgency capability. The air smelled like pine sap and gun oil, a combination Alina had come to associate with home. She found a pull-up bar near the physical training field and began her routine. 20 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 2-mile run. The numbers were automatic. Muscle memory from a decade of pre-dawn workouts. Her body conditioned to perform regardless of exhaustion or emotional state. The physical training standard for Scout Sniper School required exceptional fitness. Maintaining that fitness required daily discipline. She was on her 16th pull-up when she sensed movement behind her. Couldn't sleep either? Webb emerged from the shadows, dressed in PT gear identical to hers. He fell into formation beside the pull-up bar and waited for her to finish. Never can a night before. She dropped from the bar and shook out her arms. You. Same. 20 years of this. Still can't turn off the brain. Webb grabbed the bar and began his own set. His form was perfect, the movement smooth and controlled. Saw you leave. Figured I'd join you. Appreciated. They alternated sets in comfortable silence. Two professionals who understood the value of preparation. Finally, Webb spoke again. Tell me about Marja. Alina wiped sweat from her forehead. What do you want to know? The 18 kills. 72 hours. I heard pieces. Never got the full story. She considered the question while Webb finished his final rep. Operation Mashtarak, February 2010. Joint offensive to clear Taliban strongholds in Marja. My team was tasked with providing overwatch for the initial assault. Webb dropped from the bar. Standard HOG work so far. It was until our position got compromised. Taliban had observers in the city who triangulated our hide site. They sent a team, 23 fighters, to flank us through a drainage canal we hadn't accounted for. Ambush. They thought so. Alina's voice remained flat, clinical. My spotter picked up movement at 0340. I started engaging at 800 meters. First target was their point man carrying an RPG-7. After that, she paused. It became a shooting gallery. Webb studied her face in the darkness. You dropped 18 hostiles in 3 days by yourself. 23 total. My spotter, Sergeant Morrison, got 5, but 18 were mine. She met his eyes. I don't sleep well, Webb. I haven't slept well since my brother died. But my hands never shake. A distant bugle call drifted across the post. 0400 Reveille. Time to move, Webb said. They jogged back toward the barracks together, their footfalls synchronized. One more question, Webb said as they approached the building. Why are you here? You got nothing to prove. 47 confirmed. Silver Star legacy family. You could ride a desk until retirement and nobody would say a word. Alina stopped at the door. Carlos wanted to be a sniper. My brother. He was killed before he got the chance. She pulled open the door. Someone needs to finish what he started. Might as well be me. The formation assembled at 0430 on the concrete pad behind the barracks. 23 candidates in PT gear, shorts, brown t-shirts, running shoes. The temperature was already 68 degrees, the humidity thick enough to chew. Admiral Keller stood before them, flanked by 4 evaluation cadre members wearing black polo shirts and tactical pants. Their faces were blank, clipboards ready. "Good morning, candidates." Keller's voice carried without amplification. "Today begins the first phase of your evaluation. Physical assessments. You'll complete the standard Special Operations Fitness Test, followed by a 5-mile ruck march with 70-pound packs, followed by a water survival course in the base pool." He began pacing. "These are not pass-fail events. Every repetition, every second, every stroke will be recorded and compared against your peers. You are not competing against a standard. You are competing against each other." His eyes swept the formation and stopped on Alina. "Any questions?" Silence. "Then let's begin." The physical fitness test unfolded on the adjacent track. Push-ups first, 2-minute maximum. Alina dropped into position at the starting whistle and began counting. Her form was textbook, chest touching the deck on each repetition, arms fully extended at the top, no sagging back or raised hips. The cadre member assigned to her watched with a stopwatch, clicking each valid rep. 72 push-ups in 2 minutes. She could have done more, but pacing mattered. This was a marathon, not a sprint. Sit-ups next. Another 2 minutes. She completed 89, her abdominal muscles screaming by the final 30 seconds. Around her, she heard grunts and heavy breathing as the other candidates pushed through their own tests. Pull-ups. No time limit. Maximum reps. Alina grabbed the bar, set her grip, and began. At 20, her arms started burning. At 25, the cadre member raised an eyebrow. At 32, she dropped from the bar with controlled grace. Thornton, at the adjacent station, had managed 28. The 2-mile run finished the fitness test. Candidates were released at 30-second intervals, their times recorded individually. Alina hit the track at a pace she could maintain indefinitely, 6:23 per mile, and focus on her breathing. The July heat was already building, the sun climbing over the pine trees like a hostile observer. She passed 2 candidates who had gone out too fast and were now paying the price, their pace flagging as lactic acid flooded their legs. She crossed the finish line at 12:47, 5th fastest overall. Not bad for the only woman in the field. The ruck march began at 0700. 70-pound packs distributed from a supply truck, identical for every candidate. M4 rifles, rubber ducks, training weapons without firing pins, added another 8 pounds. 5 miles, sandy trails through pine forests, temperature climbing toward 85 degrees. Keller positioned himself at the starting line, arms crossed. "This is not a race," he announced. "You will maintain formation. Anyone who falls behind formation will be noted. Anyone who falls behind by more than 50 meters will be disqualified." He looked at Alina. "Is that clear, Staff Sergeant?" "Crystal, Admiral." The cadre set a brutal pace, 15-minute miles, which meant effectively jogging with 70 pounds on their backs. Within the first half-mile, Alina felt sweat soaking through her shirt, the pack straps digging into her shoulders. She'd done harder. Sanjan in summer, with 100 pounds of gear and the constant threat of contact. Margid during Moshtarak, humping up mountainsides while Taliban rounds snapped overhead. Her body was built for suffering. 1 mile, 2 miles. The formation began to string out despite Keller's warning. She maintained her position in the middle of the pack, neither leading nor trailing. At the 3-mile mark, one of the candidates, a Green Beret from 7th Group, stumbled and went down hard. His ankle turned on a root, and his face contorted in pain as he tried to stand. The formation kept moving. Nobody stopped. The rules were clear. Alina glanced back and saw the Green Beret struggling to his feet, his pack askew, his face pale. He took one step, then another, limping badly but still moving. She turned forward and kept marching. The water survival course was designed to break people. The base pool, Olympic-sized water temperature maintained at a precise 68 degrees, became their testing ground. Candidates entered in full BDU pants and boots, their hands bound behind their backs with paracord. "You will bob for 5 minutes," the lead cadre member announced. "Then you will swim 50 meters without the use of your arms. Then you will retrieve a brick from the bottom of the 12-foot section, using only your teeth. Anyone who panics, anyone who requests assistance, anyone who touches a pool wall will be disqualified." Alina had completed drown-proofing at Scout Sniper School 3 years earlier. The sensation of sinking with bound hands, the water closing over your head, the pressure building in your lungs, the primal terror screaming at you to break free, was familiar. Terrifying, but familiar. She slipped into the water and let herself sink. The key to drown-proofing was counterintuitive. You had to relax into the drowning. Fighting consumed oxygen. Panic consumed oxygen faster. But if you accepted the water, let it hold you, and only kicked upward when your lungs demanded air, you could survive indefinitely. 5 minutes of bobbing, breaking the surface every 15 seconds, filling her lungs with a single explosive breath before sinking again. The rhythm became meditative. When the whistle blew, 3 candidates had already been pulled from the pool by safety divers. Their selection was over. The 50-meter swim was harder. Without arms for balance or propulsion, she had a dolphin kick the entire distance, her body undulating through the water like a seal. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she touched the far wall without assistance. Brick retrieval. The final test. She hyperventilated at the surface, flooding her blood with oxygen, then jackknifted downward, 12 feet. The pressure squeezed her eardrums. She located the brick, standard construction type, red and rough, and clamped her teeth around the edge. Swimming upward with a brick in your teeth and your hands tied behind your back required every ounce of core strength and determination she possessed. The brick wanted to drag her down. Her body wanted to breathe. Her mind wanted to quit. She didn't quit. She broke the surface with the brick still clenched in her jaws and swam to the ladder, where a cadre member untied her hands and helped her onto the pool deck. Time, the cadre member said. 1 minute 47 seconds. New course record. Alina spat out the brick and gasped for air. Beside her, Thornton was just beginning his descent, his face set in concentration. He surfaced 2 minutes later, without the brick, disqualified from the event. Day 1 ended at 1,800 with 17 candidates still in the running. 6 had dropped during physical assessments, 2 from injuries, 4 from voluntary withdrawal. The survivors gathered in the briefing room for evening announcements. Keller presided from the front of the room, his expression unreadable. Tomorrow begins weapons qualification. You will demonstrate proficiency with the M4 rifle, M9 pistol, M110 SAS, and M107 Barrett. Scores will be recorded at distances from 25 to 2,000 meters. He paused. Staff Sergeant Ray. Alina straightened in her seat. Admiral, your physical performance today was adequate. The word dripped with reluctance. However, physical fitness is merely a foundation. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can actually shoot. I look forward to it, Admiral. Keller's eyes narrowed slightly. Dismissed. The weapons ranges sprawled across a restricted section of Fort Bragg, featuring purpose-built facilities for every type of qualification from close-quarters pistol work to extreme long-range precision. Alina arrived at 0530, 30 minutes before the scheduled start, to familiarize herself with the layout. The M4 qualification was straightforward. 40 rounds at distances from 25 to 300 meters, engaging pop-up silhouettes from various firing positions. Expert qualification required 36 hits. Alina dropped 39, missing a single target at 275 meters when a crosswind gusted unexpectedly. The M9 pistol course followed. 50 rounds, targets at 7 to 25 meters, including shooting on the move and one-handed firing. She qualified with 48 hits, her weakest performance, but still above the 85% threshold required. But the real test waited at the precision rifle ranges. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system was her bread and butter. A 7.62 millimeters rifle with an effective range of 800 meters, suppressed and surgically accurate in trained hands. She'd carried an M110 through 2 deployments, put over 10,000 rounds through the system, knew its personality like a lover's. The course of fire required engaging targets at 400, 600, and 800 meters, 10 rounds per distance. Time limit, 3 minutes per string. Alina settled into her prone position, adjusting the bipod legs and checking her natural point of aim. The M110 felt like an extension of her body, familiar and deadly. First distance, 400 meters. She controlled her breathing, felt the trigger brake, watched the target fall. 10 for 10. Time elapsed, 147. Second distance, 600 meters. Wind was picking up, maybe 8 miles per hour from the left. She adjusted her hold, compensating for the drift. 10 for 10. Time elapsed, 212. Third distance, 800 meters. Now the calculations became more complex. Bullet drop at 800 with 175 grain match ammo was approximately 8.7 MOA. Wind call was critical. She studied the mirage through her scope, reading the heat waves rising from the desert floor, interpreting their angle. She fired. 10 for 10. Time elapsed, 234. Perfect score. Keller was watching from the observation tower. She didn't need to look to know. The M107 Barrett qualification was a highlight of day 2. The massive .50 caliber rifle, 32 pounds of precision-engineered destruction, was designed for targets beyond a mile. Anti-material, anti-personnel at extreme range, the ultimate expression of the sniper's art. The course of fire pushed candidates through 4 distance gates, 800 meters, 1,200 meters, 1,600 meters, and 2,000 meters. 3 rounds per distance. Time limit, 5 minutes per string. At 800 meters, the M107 was almost too easy. The .50 BMG round covered the distance in approximately 1 second, the recoil manageable for anyone who'd trained with the system. Alina put 3 rounds through the target's center mass in 45 seconds. At 1,200 meters, the challenge increased. Now the bullet was in flight for nearly 1.5 seconds, subject to wind drift and the Coriolis effect. She adjusted her scope, calculated the hold, and fired. 3 hits. At 1,600 meters, just under a mile, most shooters began to struggle. The target was a steel silhouette barely visible to the naked eye, reduced to a shimmer of reflected sunlight. Bullet flight time exceeded 2 seconds. A 10 miles per hour crosswind would push the round nearly 4 feet off course. Alina studied the mirage for 30 seconds before firing her first round. Hit. She adjusted slightly for the second, watching the impact through her spotter scope. Hit. Third round. Hit. The cadre members exchanged glances. At 2,000 meters, 1.24 miles, she was operating at the edge of the M107's effective range. The target was invisible without magnification. The bullet would travel for nearly 3 seconds, dropping over 150 inches during flight. Wind drift could exceed 5 feet. Her first round struck the right edge of the target. She adjusted, calculating the error, and fired again. Center mass. Third round. Center mass. 12 for 12. Perfect score across all distances. She cleared the rifle, made it safe, and turned to find Keller standing directly behind her. Lucky shooting, he said quietly. With respect, Admiral, luck is statistical anomaly. 12 consecutive hits at increasing distances is not anomaly. It's skill. His jaw tightened. We'll see about that. Tomorrow, we begin tactical scenarios. This isn't target practice anymore, Staff Sergeant. This is simulated combat. Let's find out what you do when the targets shoot back. Tactical scenario training occupied days 3 and 4. The evaluators had constructed elaborate setups throughout the Fort Bragg training areas, mock villages, urban combat courses, hostage rescue scenarios, each designed to test decision-making under stress. Scenario 1, building clearance. Alina and 3 other candidates were assigned as a team, tasked with clearing a 2-story structure containing an unknown number of hostile targets. Simunition rounds, paint-filled bullets that hurt like hell but caused no permanent damage, would be used. She took point. The first hostile appeared at the top of the stairs, a cadre member in protective gear. Her M4 barked twice, controlled pairs to the chest, and paint splattered across his vest before he could engage. Room by room, corner to corner, she moved like water, flowing through the structure with economical precision. When one teammate hesitated at a doorway, she flowed past him and neutralized the threat inside. When another fumbled his reload, she provided covering fire until he recovered. 8 hostiles eliminated, 0 friendly casualties. Clearance time, 3:41. The cadre leader made a note on his clipboard. Scenario 2, Overwatch support. She was positioned 600 meters from a mock village where a 4-man team would conduct a simulated raid. Her role was to provide sniper overwatch, eliminating threats they couldn't see and providing intelligence via radio. The scenario began at 1400. Temperature had climbed to 92 degrees. Heat shimmer distorted the village buildings, making target identification difficult. Overwatch, this is Alpha Lead. Approaching from the south. What do you see? Alina scanned through her scope, reading the terrain like a book. Alpha Lead, Overwatch. I have 2 males on the second floor balcony, north building. They're carrying something, possibly weapons. Recommend caution. Roger, Overwatch. Engaging from cover. The team moved forward. The 2 males on the balcony revealed themselves to be hostiles when they raised AK-47 training replicas. Alina's first round struck the left shooter before he could fire. Her second dropped the right shooter mid-turn. Overwatch, Alpha Lead. Good hits. Continuing advance. The scenario continued for 47 minutes. She identified 11 hostiles, eliminated 7 personally, and guided the ground team safely to their objective. When it ended, the team leader, a SEAL lieutenant, approached the position with something like respect in his eyes. That was the cleanest Overwatch support I've ever worked with. You see things other people miss. That's the job. No. He shook his head. That's talent. Day 3 ended with 16 candidates remaining. 1 had been eliminated for a safety violation during building clearance. Another had voluntarily withdrawn after a stress-induced panic attack during the hostage scenario. Evening chow was subdued. Exhaustion had settled into everyone's bones. Even the SEALs, renowned for their bravado, ate in relative silence. Alina chose a table in the corner, her tray loaded with protein and carbohydrates. Webb materialized across from her, his own tray equally full. Day 4 tomorrow, he said between bites. The big one. What's planned? Nobody knows for sure. Keller keeps the final day classified until we're in it. Rumor is it changes every year. Customize a break, whoever he wants broken. Webb stabbed at his green beans. My money says he's designing something specifically for you. Let him. Webb smiled. You really don't scare, do you? Fear is a chemical response. I feel like everyone else. I just don't let it drive the vehicle. They ate in silence for several minutes. Finally, Webb pushed back from the table. I've been in special operations for 20 years. Delta. Before that Rangers. Before that infantry. I've seen a lot of operators come and go. Most of them. He searched for the right words. Most of them are running from something. Fighting some demon they can't name. Using combat as therapy. Alina set down her fork. And me? You're running towards something. There's a difference. Webb stood and gathered his tray. Whatever Keller throws at you tomorrow, remember that. You're not here to escape. You're here to finish something. That's power. He walked away before she could respond. Day 4 began differently. Instead of forming up at the barracks, candidates were loaded into blacked-out buses and driven for approximately 90 minutes. When the buses finally stopped and the doors opened, Alina found herself in a landscape that could have been Mars. Red desert stretched to the horizon in every direction. Scrub brush and rocky outcroppings provided the only vertical relief. The temperature was already climbing toward 90 degrees, and it was barely 0-100. Keller stood before them, flanked by a cadre that had expanded to include a dozen additional evaluators. Welcome to your final day, he announced. You are standing in a classified training facility in southwestern North Carolina. For the next 12 hours, you will be tested on every skill that matters in special operations. Physical endurance, tactical decision-making, precision marksmanship, and mental resilience. He began pacing. The 16 of you represent the finest operators in the United States military. By the end of today, 6 of you will be selected for the task force. The remaining 10 will go home. His eyes found Alina. Any questions? Rules of engagement, Admiral? You'll receive mission briefings at each station. Follow the instructions. Trust no one. And remember, he smiled coldly, nothing is what it seems. The candidates were split into individual tracks, each one directed to different starting points across the vast training area. Alina found herself standing alone before a massive sand berm, behind which she could hear the faint crack of rifle fire. A cadre member handed her an intelligence briefing. Your first scenario, he explained. Read it. You have 5 minutes to plan. Then you'll begin. She opened the folder. Scenario: precision engagement under stress. Objective: engage and neutralize hostile targets at ranges from 500 to 2,000 meters while receiving incoming fire simulated. You will move through 4 positions, engaging targets at each. Time limit: 30 minutes. Scoring based on hits, time, and tactical decision-making. Additional intelligence: wind conditions are steady at 12 miles per hour from the east. Temperature at ground level is 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 16%. Target identification may be complicated by civilian presence. Rules of engagement require positive identification before engagement. Note: intelligence may be inaccurate. She read the final sentence twice. Intelligence may be inaccurate. That was Keller talking to her directly, telling her that the game was rigged. Fine. She'd learned long ago to trust her eyes over reports. The course was brutal by design. She began at position Alpha, 500 meters from the first target array. Pop-up silhouettes appeared without warning, some marked as hostile, some as civilian. The civilian markers were subtle: a raised hand, a different color shirt. Miss a hostile, lose points. Hit a civilian, automatic disqualification. She identified and engaged 4 hostiles in 43 seconds. Her shots precise and controlled. No civilian casualties. At position Bravo, 800 meters, the challenge intensified. The wind had shifted, now gusting from the southwest instead of the steady easterly the briefing had promised. She adjusted on the fly, reading the mirage and the grass movement rather than trusting the faulty intelligence. 3 hostiles down, 12 seconds. Position Charlie, 1,200 meters. The targets were partially obscured by brush. One appeared to be holding a weapon, but the angle was wrong. She hesitated for 3 seconds, studying through her scope before recognizing it as a stick being used as a walking cane. Civilian. She held fire. The actual hostile appeared 7 seconds later, 2 meters to the left. She engaged immediately. Clean hit. Position Delta, 2,000 meters. The ultimate test. But something was wrong. The range officer had given her wind data that didn't match what she was seeing. The mirage was flowing almost perpendicular to the direction he'd indicated. Either he was mistaken, or the intelligence was deliberately false. She ignored the provided data. Instead, she spent 90 seconds studying the environment, calculating the actual wind direction and speed based on visual indicators. She adjusted her scope accordingly. The target was a steel silhouette barely visible at this range. She controlled her breathing, felt the trigger brake. The clang of steel reached her ears 3 seconds later. Time, the range officer announced. 27 minutes, 43 seconds. Perfect score. She cleared her weapon and turned to find Keller, watching from a Humvee parked 50 meters away. His face was unreadable, but his hands were clenched at his sides. The second scenario was a physical challenge designed to break bodies. A 5-mile movement through rough terrain while carrying a simulated casualty, a 180-pound sand-filled dummy, with periodic shooting tests at rest stops. She paired with Webb, the only candidate who'd volunteered to work with her. Together they traded the casualty back and forth, their legs burning as they navigated arroyos and rock fields under the merciless sun. At the first shooting rest stop, 2 miles in, she was required to engage targets at 400 meters with an M4 while her heart rate exceeded 160 BPM. She hit 4 or 5. At the second rest stop, 3.5 miles in, the test escalated to 600 meters with the M107. Her hands were trembling from exertion, her vision blurred by sweat. She hit 3 of 5. They crossed the finish line at 2:14 p.m., both candidates still standing. The casualty delivered intact. Keller was waiting. Staff Sergeant Ray. Master Sergeant Webb. You completed the course together. Interesting choice. Special Operations is a team sport, Admiral. Webb wiped sweat from his face. Seemed stupid to pretend otherwise. Some would call it weakness. Depending on others, some would be wrong. Keller's attention shifted to Alina. Your shooting accuracy dropped significantly under physical stress. Interesting. Given your earlier performance, my accuracy dropped from perfect to above average, Admiral. I'd take above average under those conditions over perfect in a sterile environment any day. Would you? Keller stepped closer. Then let's see how you perform under maximum stress. The remaining candidates, 12 now, after 4 more had been eliminated during the morning scenarios, were assembled at a remote range facility as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The temperature had finally dropped below 90, though heat still radiated from the desert floor. Keller stood before them with an M107 Barrett cradled in his arms. Behind him, a single steel target gleamed in the distance. So far away it was barely visible as a glint of reflected light. "This is the final test," he announced. "Each of you will be given one opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities with the M107 Barrett .50 caliber rifle. The target is positioned at 2,800 meters, 1.74 miles, at the extreme edge of the weapon system's effective range." Murmurs rippled to the gathered candidates. 2,800 meters. That wasn't a qualification shot. That was a world record attempt. The conditions are as follows. Temperature 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 18%. Wind variable from 12 to 15 miles per hour from the southwest with occasional gusting. Bullet flight time will exceed 5 seconds. Bullet drop will exceed 1,200 inches. Crosswind drift will exceed 7 feet. Keller set down the rifle. "I will demonstrate first. Then each of you will take your turn. Any questions?" No one spoke. Keller assumed a prone position behind the Barrett, making minute adjustments to the scope. The candidates watched in silence as he studied the distant target through his optic, his body perfectly still. He fired. The .50 caliber round thundered across the desert, the sound cracking like a whip. 5 seconds passed. 6. A puff of dust erupted approximately 15 feet to the left of the target. Keller rose without comment, his face carved from stone. Next candidate. One by one, the operators took their positions behind the Barrett. One by one, they missed. Thornton came closest, his round striking within 3 feet of the target. But even he couldn't achieve the impossible at 2,800 meters. Webb's shot went wide by 6 feet, the wind gusting at the critical moment. Ruiz, despite his reputation as an excellent marksman, couldn't compensate for the variables and missed by 4 feet. When 11 candidates had fired and 11 candidates had missed, Keller turned to the final shooter, Staff Sergeant Ray. Alina stepped forward. The Barrett waited for her, its massive frame gleaming in the evening light. She knelt beside it, studying the weapon setup without touching it. "Problem, Staff Sergeant?" "The scope," she said quietly. "It's been adjusted since the last shooter. The elevation dial has been moved 3 clicks. Keller's expression flickered. Surprise, quickly suppressed. "Are you suggesting someone tampered with the equipment? I'm observing that the scope settings don't match the previous shooter's configuration. I'm correcting before I fire." She made 3 clicks of adjustment, restoring the scope to its proper 0. Then she settled into position. The prone position was second nature. She'd spent thousands of hours behind rifles like this one. Her body molded to the earth, her breathing synchronized with her heartbeat. The rifle became an extension of her skeletal system, bone and steel joined in purpose. She pressed her eye to the scope. The target shimmered in the heat haze, a ghost of metal wavering at the edge of perception. At 2,800 meters, even with 25 power magnification, it was barely more than a suggestion, a slight vertical interruption in the horizontal desert landscape. She began her calculations. Distance, 2,800 meters. Bullet, .50 BMG, 750 grain AMAX. Muzzle velocity, 2,800 feet per second. Flight time, approximately 5.3 seconds. Gravity would pull the bullet down 1,247 inches during that flight. Her scope needed to compensate by dialing 127.4 MOA of elevation, or she could hold overusing the mil dots in her reticle. Wind, variable, 12 to 15 miles per hour from the southwest. At this range, that meant drift of 84 to 105 inches, depending on the exact speed. But the wind wasn't constant. She could see it in the grass, in the dust devils, in the way the mirage flowed and shifted. She couldn't shoot at what the wind was doing. She had to shoot at what it would be doing in 5 seconds. The spin drift, the gyroscopic drift caused by the bullet's clockwise rotation, would add another 8 inches of rightward movement at this distance. Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself, would contribute an additional 4 inches of drift over this flight time. Temperature affected air density, which affected drag, which affected velocity, which affected time of flight, which affected everything else. All of these variables had to be calculated simultaneously, adjusted for, and committed to a single trigger pull. She studied the mirage for 30 seconds. The heat waves flowing left to right indicated wind direction, but their speed told her the velocity. Slow shimmer meant light wind. Fast shimmer meant heavy gusts. Right now, the shimmer was moderate. 12 miles per hour, maybe 13. She watched the dust devil form and die 300 meters downrange. The way it spiraled told her the wind was strengthening. She adjusted her hold, waited. The dust devil collapsed. The mirage smoothed. A momentary lull in the wind. Now, her finger moved of its own accord, the trigger brake surprising her even though she'd initiated it. The Barrett roared, the recoil driving into her shoulder with familiar violence. The .50 caliber round departed at 2,800 feet per second, spinning at 167,000 revolutions per minute, beginning its 1.74-mile journey toward steel. 1 second. The bullet climbed on its ballistic arc, still above the target's plane. 2 seconds. It reached the apex of its trajectory, now beginning the long descent toward the target. 3 seconds. Wind pushed it left. Gravity pulled it down. Spin stabilization kept it point forward. 4 seconds. The bullet was falling rapidly now, its velocity diminished by drag, its path curving toward the earth. 5 seconds. The steel rang. For a moment, nobody moved. The sound, a clear, unmistakable clang, had taken nearly 9 seconds to travel back to the firing line, but it was there. Real. Undeniable. She'd hit it at 2,800 meters. In swirling desert winds, with a scope that had been deliberately misadjusted. The first person to react was Webb, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. Holy! He caught himself, military bearing reasserting itself, but his face said everything. Thornton was staring at the distant target through binoculars, his jaw slack. She hit it, dead center. I can see the impact mark. The other candidates began talking at once, disbelief mixing with genuine admiration. This was beyond qualification, beyond impressive. This was history. Alina rose from the prone position and made the Barrett safe, her movement precise and unhurried. She turned to face Keller. His face had gone pale beneath the desert tan. The muscles in his jaw were working, processing something that clearly didn't fit his worldview. Admiral, she said quietly, permission to secure my weapon? Keller didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the target, invisible now in the growing dusk, as if he could will it to change what had happened. Admiral? He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Fort Bragg, she saw something other than contempt in his eyes. Staff Sergeant Ray. His voice was rough. Report to my office at 1900 hours. The drive back to Fort Bragg was silent. Alina sat alone in the back of a Humvee, her body exhausted but her mind racing through possibilities. The shot had been real, the impact undeniable. But Keller's reaction, that pale, shocked expression, could mean anything. She arrived at his office at 1858, 2 minutes early, and knocked twice. Enter. The office was Spartan. A metal desk, 2 chairs, American flag in the corner, wall of photographs from 3 decades of special operations. Keller sat behind the desk, his hands folded before him, a manila folder closed on the surface between them. Sit down, Staff Sergeant. She sat. That shot. He paused, seeming to search for words. I've been in naval special warfare for 32 years. I've trained with the best snipers in the world. I've watched men attempt that shot in better conditions and fail. Every single time. Yes, Admiral. The scope was adjusted before you fired. Did you know that? I observed it when I took position, and you corrected it. I did. Keller leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. Who taught you to notice such things? My grandfather. He trained under Carlos Hathcock in Vietnam. Hathcock was famous for setting traps, adjusting scopes, altering equipment, to test whether his students were truly paying attention or just going through motions. So when you saw the misadjusted scope, I knew it was deliberate. I assumed you were testing me. So I corrected it and took the shot. Keller nodded slowly. He opened the manila folder and studied its contents for a long moment. Staff Sergeant Alina Ray, 29 years old, 10 years in the Marine Corps. Scout Sniper qualified at 23. Youngest woman to ever complete the course. 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments to Afghanistan. Silver Star for Valor during Operation Moshtarak. 3 Bronze Stars. Purple Heart. Letters of commendation from 2 different CENTCOM commanders. He closed the folder. Your brother was killed in San Jin. Carlos Ray. Lance Corporal. ID. The name hit her like a physical blow. She kept her face neutral, but her hands tightened on the chair's armrests. Your grandfather, Miguel Ray, was one of the finest snipers to serve in Vietnam. Your father would have followed in his footsteps, but a training accident ended his career before it began. And now you... Keller studied her face, carrying the weight of 3 generations. For if Carlos had lived, the words came out before she could stop them. Keller blinked. He wanted to be a sniper, she continued. My brother. He looked up to Grandpa Miguel. Looked up to me. I was going to teach him everything. Her voice remained steady, but something raw had entered it. He was killed 400 meters from my position. I was providing overwatch. I watched through my scope as the IED detonated. I'm sorry. The word surprised them both. Keller's expression had shifted. The adversarial edge softened into something approaching human understanding. I lost men too, he said quietly. Good men. Men I trained, led, trusted with my life. Every one of them haunts me. Every one of them asks whether I did enough to bring them home. What do you tell them? That I tried. That's all any of us can do. He straightened in his chair. Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology. Alina waited. I came into this election process determined to prove that women don't belong in special operations. I designed tests to expose your weaknesses, provided false intelligence to sabotage your performance, and adjusted that scope specifically to make you fail the final test. His voice was tight with something that might have been shame. And despite everything I threw at you, you didn't just perform adequately. You excelled. Your physical fitness scores ranked in the top 5. Your marksmanship was flawless across every weapon system. Your tactical decision-making showed maturity and judgment beyond your years. And that shot, he shook his head. I have never seen anyone make that shot, men or women. In 32 years of special operations, I have never witnessed a feat of marksmanship that comes close to what you did today. Admiral, I'm not finished. He held up a hand. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about all of it. The standards exist for a reason, to ensure that only the most capable warriors serve in special operations roles. But capability isn't determined by gender. It's determined by training, dedication, and talent. He stood and extended his hand. Congratulations, Staff Sergeant Ray. You've been selected for the task force. Alina rose and shook his hand, her grip firm and steady. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. The task force is where the real work begins. What you've accomplished here was just the audition. The selection results were announced the following morning. Of the original 23 candidates, 6 had earned positions on the task force. Staff Sergeant Alina Ray, USMC. Master Sergeant Marcus Webb, 1st SFODD. Staff Sergeant Diego Ruiz, 1st Marine Raider Battalion. Petty Officer 1st Class Eric Thornton, SEAL Team 6. Sergeant 1st Class David Chun, 7th Special Forces Group. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Nakamura, Navy EOD. Alina noted that 2 of the 6 selectees were women. Sarah Nakamura had been operating quietly throughout the selection, her EOD background giving her a different skill set than the shooters who dominated attention. She qualified on every weapon system, excelled in the tactical scenarios, and completed every physical challenge without complaint. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Alina's grandfather had once told her, they watch, they learn, they wait for their moment. The task force began training immediately. 6 months of intensive work followed the selection, hostage rescue scenarios, counterterrorism operations, precision raids against hardened targets. The team operated as a scalpel, small, precise, devastating when properly employed. Keller oversaw their development with a different energy than he brought to the selection process. Gone was the antagonism, replaced by a demanding but fair leadership style that pushed each operator to their maximum potential. He took particular interest in Alina's sniper capabilities, arranging specialized training with the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Instructor Course and securing access to experimental ammunition and optics. That 2,800-meter shot wasn't luck, he told her one evening after a particularly brutal training exercise. It was a culmination of years of preparation, meeting a single moment of perfect execution. But you can't rely on single moments. You need to be able to perform at that level consistently. I know. Do you? He studied her face. You've spent your entire career proving yourself. Proving to your grandfather that you're worthy of his legacy. Proving to your commanders that women belong in combat roles. Proving to yourself that you're not destroyed by your brother's death. Alina stiffened. Admiral, but you've already proven everything there is to prove. The next phase of your development isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about becoming the leader that others need you to be. The word stayed with her as she returned to the barracks, turning them over in her mind like a weapon being field stripped. Leadership. It had never been her focus. She'd always been the shooter, the isolated variable, the one who operated alone with only her spotter for company. Snipers were different from other operators. They didn't storm buildings or conduct assaults. They provided overwatch. They eliminated high-value targets. They were ghosts who never touched the ground others walked on. But Keller was right. If she wanted to honor Carlos's memory, really honor it, she needed to become more than a lone shooter. She needed to become someone who could train the next generation. Someone who could ensure that no other sister watched her brother die through a rifle scope. The mission call came at 0347 on a Thursday morning. Flash traffic from JSOC headquarters. Priority Alpha. Task Force Thunder, their newly designated unit, was to deploy within 4 hours to an undisclosed location in the Middle East. Intelligence indicated that a high-value target, a terrorist financier responsible for funding attacks that had killed over 200 Americans, would be present at a compound for the next 36 hours. This was their first real-world operation. Alina found herself in the mission briefing room at 0430, still pulling on her gear as the intelligence officer began her presentation. The target compound is located in a mountainous region approximately 40 kilometers from the nearest coalition base. Terrain is rocky and exposed, with minimal cover for approach. The compound itself consists of 3 structures, a main building used for meetings, a smaller residential structure, and an outbuilding containing vehicles and equipment. Satellite imagery appeared on the screen, the compound rendered in stark black and white. We estimate 15 to 20 hostile personnel on site, including the primary target. They are equipped with small arms, AK-47s, PK machine guns, and possibly RPG-7s. The compound has overlapping field of fire and no obvious blind spots. Webb raised his hand. Infiltration route. Helicopter insertion 3 kilometers south of the target. Foot movement through rocky terrain to a designated assault position. H-hour is set for 0200 local time tomorrow morning. Keller took over briefing. This is a direct action raid with precision fire support. Staff Sergeant Ray will establish a sniper position on the ridgeline overlooking the compound, providing overwatch for the assault element. Her primary responsibility is eliminating any threats that could compromise the assault or endanger the operators. He looked at Alina directly. We're counting on you. Don't miss. I won't, Admiral. The flight was 6 hours. Alina spent most of it in silent preparation, going over her equipment with obsessive attention to detail. Her M107 Barrett, the same rifle she'd used for the 2,800-meter shot, had been serviced and zeroed specifically for the mission. Her spotter scope, rangefinder, ballistic computer, and communications gear were all functional and ready. She also carried an M4 carbine with an ACOG sight for close-range engagements, an M9 pistol as a sidearm, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. The helicopter touched down in darkness, the rotors kicking up clouds of dust that tasted like ancient history. The team moved quickly, silently, each operator finding their position in the formation without verbal communication. Alina and her assigned spotter, Chief Petty Officer Nakamura, who had proven herself an excellent marksman despite her EOD background, split off in the main group and began their approach to the ridgeline. The terrain was brutal. Loose rock and scree made every footstep treacherous. The elevation rose steadily, forcing them to scramble up steep inclines while carrying over 80 pounds of gear each. But they'd trained for this. Their bodies were machines built for this exact purpose. They reached the designated sniper position at 0115, 45 minutes before H-hour. The ridgeline provided an excellent view of the compound, which sat in a natural depression approximately 2,400 meters away. 2,400 meters. Not as far as a training shot, but far enough that any engagement would require perfect calculations. Alina established her position, constructing a stable firing platform from available materials. Nakamura set up beside her, spotter scope already scanning the compound. "I count 16 personnel," Nakamura reported quietly. 12 in the main building, 2 patrolling the perimeter, 2 in the outbuilding. "Any visual on the primary target?" "Negative. Must be inside." Alina settled behind her rifle and began her own scan. The compound's layout matched the satellite imagery. 3 structures arranged in a rough triangle, with the main building positioned to overlook the approach routes. The hostile patrols moved in predictable patterns. 2-man teams, circling the perimeter every 15 minutes. Their spacing suggested professional training, but their posture revealed complacency. They weren't expecting an assault. "Assault element. This is Overwatch. We are in position." 16 hostile confirmed. 2-man patrol pattern on 15-minute rotation. Webb's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Copy, Overwatch. We are 500 meters out. Beginning final approach." The next 45 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Alina tracked the patrol patterns, noting their timing and routes. She identified potential high-value targets based on their movement and positioning. She calculated wind drift at the current conditions, 8 miles per hour from the north, steady, and dialed her scope accordingly. At 0158, Webb's voice came through again. "Assault element in position. 2 minutes to H-hour. Overwatch copies. Standing by." The patrol team was completing another circuit. They would be on the far side of the compound when the assault began, a 30-second window before they could respond. 1 minute. Alina placed her crosshairs on the nearest hostile sentry, a man with an AK-47 slung across his chest. He was smoking a cigarette, the ember a tiny orange beacon in the darkness. He had no idea that death was watching from 2,400 meters away. 30 seconds. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world compressed to the space between her eye and the scope. Execute, execute, execute. The assault element breached the main building's door with a shaped charge, the explosion echoing across the mountain valley. In the same instant, Alina's finger moved. The Barrett roared. The sentry with a cigarette dropped instantly, the .50 caliber round arriving faster than sound, faster than comprehension. His partner turned at the noise and died before he could complete the motion. Alina had already shifted targets, her follow-up shot striking center mass from 2,400 meters. 2 down, Nakamura reported. Assault element entering main building. Inside the compound, chaos erupted. Gunfire crackled from the main building. Control bursts in the assault team suppressed M4S, answered by the sharper crack of AK-47s. A hostile emerged from the outbuilding carrying an RPG-7. Alina tracked him for half a second, led the target slightly to account for his movement, and fired. The round caught him in the chest before he could raise the launcher. The RPG tumbled to the ground, unfired. RPG threat neutralized. More hostiles poured from the residential structure, weapons blazing toward the main building. They hadn't seen the sniper position. Their fire was directed at the assault element. Alina began working through them systematically. First target, a man with a PK machine gun, potentially the most dangerous threat. Her round struck his shoulder and spun him to the ground. Second target, another AK-wielding hostile. Clean hit, center mass. Third target, a man trying to flank the main building. She caught him mid-stride. Main building clear. Webb's voice came through. Primary target is not present. I repeat, primary target is not present. He's in the residential structure. The residential structure, where 5 hostiles had just emerged, now reduced to 2 by Alina's fire. Overwatch, can you provide cover for movement to the residential structure? Affirmative. 2 hostiles visible at the front entrance. Stand by. She shifted her aim. The two remaining hostiles had taken cover behind a low stone wall, their positions partially obscured. She could see one shoulder, not enough for a kill shot, but enough to suppress. She fired. The round struck the wall 6 inches from the hostile's position, spraying him with stone fragments. He flinched backward, exposing his chest for a split second, long enough. Her follow-up round caught him before he could recover. The final hostile broke from cover, sprinting toward the vehicle outbuilding. She led him by 2 body lengths, compensating for his movement at 2,400 meters, and fired. The round arrived at the same instant. He reached the outbuilding door. He collapsed across the threshold. All visible hostiles neutralized. Assault element, you are clear to move. Webb's team crossed the open ground in seconds, stacking on the residential structure's door. Another shaped charge. Another breach. Gunfire erupted inside. Alina scanned for additional threats, her scope sweeping the compound perimeter. Movement. A vehicle, one of the trucks from the outbuilding, was moving. Someone had survived and was attempting to escape. Vehicle mobile, northwest corner of compound. Possible target exfiltration. Overwatch, can you disable? The truck was accelerating rapidly, bouncing across the rough terrain toward a dirt road that led down the mountain. Range, 2,200 meters and increasing. Vehicle speed, maybe 35 miles per hour. Moving target engagement at extreme range. This was a shot that separated good snipers from legends. She tracked the vehicle, calculating its speed and trajectory. At 35 miles per hour, it would cover approximately 51 feet per second. Flight time for her round, roughly 4.8 seconds. That meant she needed to lead the vehicle by approximately 245 feet, nearly the length of a football field. She adjusted her aim, placing her crosshairs on empty air far ahead of the fleeing truck. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The Barrett roared. For nearly 5 seconds, she watched through her scope as the truck continued down the road. Had she missed? The calculations were sound, but at this range with a moving target, the truck's front tire exploded. The vehicle swerved violently, overcorrected, and rolled twice before coming to rest on its roof in a cloud of dust. Vehicle disabled. Hostile is attempting to flee on foot. Through her scope, she could see a figure crawling from the wreckage, disoriented, injured, but moving. Assault element. We have the primary target 200 meters north of the vehicle. He is mobile but injured. Copy, Overwatch. Moving to intercept. Alina kept her crosshairs on the fleeing figure. At this distance, now over 2,500 meters, she could still make the shot if necessary. But orders were to capture alive if possible. The man stumbled, fell, got up, stumbled again. He was holding his right arm against his chest, broken in the crash, probably. His movements were erratic, panicked, the desperate motions of someone who knew death was coming. Webb's team reached him 2 minutes later. The capture was anticlimactic. The man collapsed to his knees and offered no resistance. Within 30 seconds, he was flex-cuffed and being moved back toward the extraction point. Overwatch, this is assault lead. Mission complete. Primary target secured. All hostiles neutralized or captured. 0 friendly casualties. Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Copy, assault lead. Overwatch breaking down. See you at extract. She and Nakamura gathered their equipment and began the descent from the ridgeline. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, dawn approaching over the mountains. They reached the extraction point as the helicopters were arriving, the rotors creating a sandstorm that coated everyone in fine dust. The assault team was already loading aboard, the captured terrorist secure between 2 operators. Webb caught Alina's arm as she approached the helicopter. That vehicle shot, he said, shouting over the rotor noise. I've never seen anything like it. Got lucky with the tire. That wasn't luck. Webb shook his head. I've seen you shoot. That was the opposite of luck. The flight back was shorter than the flight out, a different base, closer to the target area. They landed as the sun broke fully over the horizon, its light painting the helicopter's metal skin gold and orange. Keller was waiting on the tarmac. He didn't say anything as the team disembarked, didn't offer congratulations or debrief comments. He simply stood watching, his weathered face unreadable, as each operator filed past. When Alina approached, he fell into step beside her. After-action reports indicate you engaged and neutralized 11 hostiles. including a moving vehicle shot at over 2,200 meters. Yes, Admiral. And you provided Overwatch support that enabled the assault element to complete their mission without a single friendly casualty. That's the job, Admiral. Keller stopped walking, forcing her to stop as well. They stood in the morning light, dust still clinging to their uniforms, the smell of cordite and sweat heavy in the air. 11 kills tonight, added to your 47 confirmed. That's 58 total. He paused. Your grandfather had 93. I know. You'll catch him, probably surpass him. Keller's voice held something she'd never heard before. Respect, certainly, but also something deeper, almost paternal. But I hope you don't. Alina frowned. Admiral, war has a way of consuming the best of us. The more skilled you become, the more they'll use you. Every high-value target, every impossible shot, every mission that nobody else can accomplish, they'll put it on your shoulders. He met her eyes. I've watched it happen to too many good operators. The best become addicted to the work. They lose themselves in it. And eventually, the work takes everything. What are you saying? I'm saying that you've proven everything you needed to prove. You've honored your grandfather's legacy. You've shown that capability transcends gender. You've earned your place among the finest warriors this nation has ever produced. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Now the question is, what do you do with what you built? The question stayed with her through the debrief, through the intelligence review, through the long hours of documentation and reporting that followed every mission. 23 operators' lives saved, 1 high-value target captured, a terrorist network's financing disrupted for years to come, and 11 more souls on her conscience. She found herself standing outside the base chapel at midnight, the stars brilliant overhead, the desert air cool and clean. The chapel was non-denominational, a concession to military's diverse religious makeup, but the cross above its doors still caught the moonlight. She didn't go inside. She never did. Instead, she sat on the wooden bench outside, her hands folded in her lap, her mind wandering through corridors of memory. Carlos had been religious. Their mother's influence. Catholic Mass every Sunday, rosary beads in his pocket during deployment. He'd pray before every mission, crossing himself and whispering words Alina could never quite hear. She wondered if he'd had time to pray before the IED detonated. Probably not. The pressure plates triggered instantly. One moment walking, the next moment gone. No time for prayer. No time for final words. No time for anything at all. Thought I'd find you here. Webb emerged from the shadows, his bulk somehow silent despite his size. He sat down beside her on the bench without asking permission. How did you know? Chapel's the only quiet spot on base. And you got that look. What look? The one we all get after we add numbers to our count. Webb stretched his legs out before him. 58 now, right? If tonight's kills are confirmed. Yes. Heavy number. They were all bad men. Terrorists. Murderers. Doesn't matter. Webb's voice was gentle. A death is a death. Justified or not, your soul keeps track. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the stars roll slowly overhead. I've been thinking about Keller's question, Alina said finally, about what I do next. And when I was providing Overwatch tonight, when I was protecting you and the team, that's when I felt most alive. Not when I was taking the shots, but when I was keeping people safe. She paused. My grandfather spent the last 15 years of his life training young snipers, passing on what he'd learned so others could serve. You thinking about training? I'm thinking about legacy. She turned to face him. Carlos wanted to be a sniper. He never got the chance. But there are other young Marines out there, other operators who want to learn this craft, who want to serve at the highest level. Men and women, especially women. Alina's voice hardened slightly. The military is changing. More women are entering combat roles every year. Someone needs to train them. Someone who's been where they're going, who can teach them to survive. Webb nodded slowly. The first female operator to train the next generation of female operators. Not just female. Anyone who has the capability. Anyone who can meet the standard. She smiled thinly. Keller was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one thing. Standards matter. Capability matters. And if someone has the capability, gender shouldn't determine whether they're given the opportunity. So what's your plan? Finish my tour with the task force. Apply for instructor positions at Scout Sniper School. Build a program that takes what my grandfather taught me and passes it on to the next generation. That's a 5-year plan minimum. I know. I've got time. She stood and stretched her arms overhead. And in the meantime, I've got work to do. Bad men don't eliminate themselves. Webb stood as well, his expression thoughtful. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're going to change things. Not just for women in special operations, but for how the whole community thinks about who can serve and how we serve them. That's a lot of pressure. You handle pressure pretty well. Webb grinned. That 2,800-meter shot wasn't exactly low stakes. 3 weeks later, Alina stood before Congressional Subcommittee on Military Readiness. Her dress blues immaculate, her ribbons arranged in precise rows across her chest. The hearing room was packed. Senators, generals, reporters, and in the front row, watching with an expression of quiet pride, Rear Admiral Harrison Keller. Staff Sergeant Ray. The committee chair began. You've been asked to testify today regarding your experiences as a female operator in special operations roles. Could you summarize your qualifications for the committee? Yes, Senator. Alina kept her voice steady, professional. I am a Marine Corps Scout Sniper with 10 years of service. I have completed 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan, where I accumulated 58 confirmed kills. I was recently selected for a joint special operations task force, where I participated in successful counterterrorism operations in the Middle East. And you are the first woman to serve on this particular task force. One of 2, Senator. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Nakamura was also selected. The senator nodded. There's been considerable debate in Congress about whether women should serve in special operations roles. Critics argue that the physical demands are too great, that unit cohesion would suffer, and that women would be unable to perform under the stress of combat. What is your response to these concerns? Alina took a breath. Senator, with respect, I'd let my record speak for itself. But since you've asked, I'll say this. The standards for special operations exist because they predict battlefield performance. Anyone who can meet those standards, who can complete the training, pass the qualifications, and perform under combat conditions, deserves the opportunity to serve. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I didn't ask for the standards to be lowered. I didn't ask for special accommodations. I trained harder than I've ever trained in my life, and I competed against some of the finest operators in the United States military. I was selected because my performance exceeded that of many of my male competitors. Not because I was given preference, but because I earned it. The room was silent. She continued, there will be women who can't meet the standards, just as there are men who can't meet them. That's the point of standards, to ensure that only the most capable warriors serve in these roles. But capability isn't determined by gender. It's determined by training, dedication, and the willingness to push beyond what you thought was possible. Admiral Keller rose from his seat in the front row. If I may, Senator? The chair looked surprised. Admiral Keller, you weren't scheduled to testify today. I understand, but I believe my perspective is relevant to this discussion. The senator glanced at his colleagues, received nods, and gestured for Keller to proceed. Keller walked to the witness table and stood beside Alina. His posture was rigid military, his face carved from the same granite it had always been. Senator, I've spent 32 years in naval special warfare. I've trained thousands of operators and led hundreds of combat missions. I've seen men break under pressure that would crush civilians, and I've seen boys become legends through sheer force of will. He paused. I came into the selection process that chose Staff Sergeant Ray determined to prove that women don't belong in special operations. I designed tests specifically intended to expose her weaknesses. I provided false intelligence to sabotage her performance. I personally adjusted equipment to make her fail the final qualification event. Murmurs rippled through the hearing room. And despite everything I threw at her, Staff Sergeant Ray didn't just meet the standards. She exceeded them. Her physical fitness scores ranked in the top 10% of all candidates, male or female. Her marksmanship was flawless across every weapon system. And her tactical decision-making under stress demonstrated judgment and maturity that I rarely see in operators with twice her experience. Keller turned to face the committee directly. I was wrong about Staff Sergeant Ray and about the broader question of women in special operations. Capability isn't determined by gender. It's determined by the individual. And this individual is one of the finest warriors I've ever had the privilege of serving alongside. He paused. I recommend that Congress continue expanding opportunities for women in combat roles, with one critical caveat. The standards must remain unchanged. Anyone who can meet those standards, regardless of gender, deserves the opportunity to serve. And anyone who can't meet them, regardless of gender, should not. The hearing continued for another 2 hours, but the momentum had shifted. Keller's testimony, his public acknowledgement of his own bias and his conversion to an advocate for merit-based election, carried weight that no statistics or policy arguments could match. When the session finally ended, Alina found herself standing outside the hearing room with Keller. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me. His voice was gruff, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. I was wrong about you. This was the least I could do to make it right. Still, it couldn't have been easy. Admitting all that publicly, Keller shrugged. Leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about being willing to change when you're wrong. He extended his hand. You've earned every opportunity that comes your way, Staff Sergeant. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She shook his hand. What's next for you, Admiral? Retirement. Finally. He almost smiled. 32 years is enough. Time to let the next generation take over. He paused. Although I hear you're thinking about instructor duty, I am. Good. The Corps needs people like you training the next generation. People who understand that capability matters more than tradition. He turned to leave, then paused. Your grandfather will be proud of you. I hope you know that. The words hit her harder than she expected. She blinked, steadied herself, nodded once. I know. Thank you, Admiral. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Alina Ray reported to Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, not as a student, but as an instructor. The class before her was 23 Marines. 4 of them were women. She stood at the front of the classroom, her silver star and bronze stars and purple heart arranged on her chest, her eyes sweeping across the young faces that watched her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and reverence. Good morning. I'm Staff Sergeant Ray. I will be your primary instructor for the precision marksmanship portion of this course. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. Some of you are here because you believe you're already good shooters. You've qualified expert on every range, impressed your commanders, been told you have natural talent. Let me be clear, that means nothing here. What you've done before doesn't matter. What matters is what you'll become. Her voice carried across the silent room. Sniper training isn't about shooting. Anyone can learn to shoot. Sniper training is about becoming something more than human, an extension of your rifle, a ghost in the landscape, a weapon that thinks and adapts and overcomes. It's about learning to operate at the edge of human capability and pushing beyond that edge when the mission demands it. She walked slowly along the front row, making eye contact with each student. I have 58 confirmed kills. I've made shots that people told me were impossible. I've watched brothers and sisters die because someone wasn't good enough, fast enough, skilled enough. I will teach you everything I know, and I will demand more of you than you believe you're capable of giving. She stopped before one of the female Marines, a young Lance Corporal with determined eyes and trembling hands. Some of you are here to prove that women belong in combat roles. Let me save you the effort. She leaned closer. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You need to become the best version of yourself. Let your capability speak for itself. The rest is noise. She straightened and returned to the front of the room. We begin at 0500 tomorrow. Physical training followed by classroom instruction, followed by range time. Expect to be exhausted. Expect to be frustrated. Expect to fail repeatedly before you succeed. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. And expect to become something extraordinary. That evening, Alina stood alone on the Quantico range, her Barrett positioned on its bipod, the target barely visible at 2,000 meters in the fading light. She didn't fire. Didn't need to. Instead, she watched the sun set over Virginia, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and thought about legacies. Her grandfather, Miguel, 93 confirmed kills, training young Marines until the cancer took him. Her brother, Carlos, 23 years old forever, buried in Arlington with a flag draped over his casket. Herself, still breathing, still serving, still carrying the weight of their memories and the hope of their legacy. The next generation was waiting in the barracks behind her, dreaming of the warriors they would become. Some would fail, some would quit, but some, the ones with the capability and the will, would become legends in their own right, and she would be there to guide them, to teach them, to honor Carlos's memory by ensuring that others had the opportunity he never received. The sun dipped below the horizon. Stars began to emerge, distant and ancient and utterly indifferent to the small drama of human ambition. Alina gathered her rifle and walked back toward the lights of the school, ready to begin the next chapter. Behind her, the empty range stretched into darkness. 2,000 meters of silence, waiting for tomorrow's students to fill it with the sound of their becoming. If the story of courage and perseverance kept you engaged, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments. If you were in Alina's position, facing that sabotage scope at 2,800 meters, would you have called out the Admiral or simply corrected and fired? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. See you in the next one.